There's been a recent surge of concerning events involving commonly used FMCG household products in India. These include Cadbury's Bournvita losing its health drinks label, the FSSAI launching an inquiry into elevated sugar levels in Nestle's baby food, and the prohibition of Indian spice brands MDH and Everest in Singapore and Hong Kong due to suspicions of them containing the cancer-causing pesticide ethylene oxide. These are not isolated incidents. Previous reports have flagged various everyday items like bread, sanitary pads, noodles, ghee, and honey for containing harmful chemicals and failing safety tests. Important to note that many of the companies involved have denied the allegations. Today, we are delving into why these incidents are happening, pinpointing where the supply chain is faltering, and importantly discussing the potential adverse effects of these products on human health. Are these contaminated products elevating the risk of serious illnesses such as cancer? Joining us to explore these questions further is Ashwin Badri, who is the founder and CEO of Equinox Labs, Dr. Manish Singhal, who is a medical oncologist at Indraprastha Apollo Hospitals in Delhi, and Dr. Neeti Raizada, Senior Director, Medical Oncology at Fortis Group of Hospitals. Welcome to the show. Well, Ashwin, let's start with you. Where do you think there are the potential points of failure when it comes to the supply chain?
So one of the biggest points of failure is when customers are getting their products, they believe on a specific brand, right? Most brands today outsource their manufacturing to multiple sub-vendors. If these sub-vendors are not monitored on a regular basis, if the quality checks are not done on a regular basis, this is when the issues can happen. Two, India today has a very robust laboratory infrastructure already in place. So you cannot blame the government for saying, oh, there's not enough infrastructure. So infrastructure is in place, but companies need to start using that infrastructure to make sure that the samples which are samples which are exported or samples which are even sent within the country are tested as per the norms. Many a times the challenge that we face is the norms in India here and internationally they're here. That can cause a very large issue because an Indian lab would test it, we would find it okay as per the Indian norms. When they go abroad, there are challenges. The second thing is many a times the test methods which get used could be different. The way companies have solved this or the way India has solved this is we have a body called NABL, National Accredited Board of Laboratories, which is in line with IS 17025 accredited laboratories globally. What this means is the test methods that are used by this lab are the same that are used by all international labs. So that has put us at par. The big challenge comes is that many a times if a company is sending a shipment abroad and they do not get it tested, or they go to a spurious lab who's not really testing it and giving them past reports, that can cause a very, very large challenge. 10 years ago, this was a rampant issue. Now it is much within control. However, there are a lot of companies that would not test the product, either to save money or if they're using substandard ingredients to hide that. The big issue now is international companies who are importing this are checking every consignment, and these things are being caught now a lot more often. See, every single product cannot be tested when it enters every country, right? Like everything India imports, not every single container is opened and tested. Same way, our exports, not every single one is opened and tested. But when they do get tested and something gets caught, it could be 1 in 1,000, but also the world looks at it as like everything has been contaminated, right? So that also puts a very bad name for our country. The ways to solve this problem is every single consignment that gets exported, every single consignment that's supplied within the country needs to go to an accredited laboratory. The test reports have to be done. Only when the test reports have passed should that consignment go out. Many a times consignments go out without the reports are following through.
Okay, all right. Well, Dr. Neeti, I wanted to come to you. So what is the exact linkage of carcinogens in household products to disease and to cancer?
See, basically, how do you define cancer? Cancer is uncontrolled rapid multiplication of abnormal cells. There is a factor which would cause DNA damage, and that would lead to uncontrolled multiplication. Now, this DNA damage could be linked to a chemical product in your food. It could be in your environment. So, as you mentioned, ethylene oxide, which is used actually as a pesticide or a fumigant for spices, when it's in excess quantity, can cause nitrates and nitrites in processed meat or processed food, excess dose of artificial sweeteners, even normally OCP used for a prolonged time, if all these are done in an abnormal way, they could be causing some kind of DNA damage, which can lead to carcinogenesis.
Have you seen increased incidences or incidences as a whole where there can be some kind of causality of the patient who's probably been diagnosed with a serious disease or cancer with their chemical exposure?
Ekta, I think historically we have proven that chemicals are linked to cancer, starting from alcohol and tobacco, which we all of us have been talking for almost 5 decades that this can cause cancer. And yes, there has been increase, but we cannot actually quantify the increase because of these chemical exposure. But overall, the number of cancers has increased, and we know that cancer is a lifestyle disease. And lifestyle changes, acquiring more westernized lifestyle, more processed food has increased the rate of cancer.
Okay, all right, that point is taken. But Ashwin, I want to come to you. Do you think that pesticide contamination is a serious issue which needs to be looked at more closely? And how is it tackled, or how is it even looked at in India?
When you look at pesticide contamination today, while there are a lot of laws and regulations in place, who is going and monitoring how much pesticide is being added at a farm level? There's no monitoring of that, right? Now you have to understand a farmer's perspective. He has an X amount of land, he has to get the max amount of it. He's going to look at what is my cost of pesticide to my cost of yield, and he's going to do the best he can. There is no possible way for us to go through every single farm every time pesticide is being sprayed. The only way possible is whatever is coming from farm to fork in between, when raw materials are being bought, doing pesticide level checks then. Now what many brands do is they skimp on that cost. They will not get it tested. They'll say, oh, the process will take care of it. The process doesn't take care of it, right? Removing pesticide from grains is not a very easy process. So unless you take very selected steps, it's going to be impossible to get that out. Now what is put in is what is going to come out, right? So a brand, if they're not taking steps to control their quality chain, if they're not taking steps to monitor the vendors that they're using, where they're buying the material from, buying organic or not. Now again, if we say organic, cost goes up, because if you don't use pesticides, the amount of crop per hectare is lesser, hence the cost goes higher, right? So people, go on.
So what are the regulations for pesticide usage in India? Are there any regulations?
There are multiple regulations. I'm not an expert on pesticide regulations. However, there are regulations, but enforcement of these regulations is a very large challenge.
Okay, all right, point is taken. Well, Dr. Manish, I'm going to come to you about these harmful exposures of chemicals in a small amount. But on a regular basis. So that is probably linked to an example of, say, Johnson & Johnson and their talcum powder, which has allegedly been linked to cases of ovarian cancer in the US. And there have been multiple lawsuits in the US with regards to that. It's over a period of time and small amount of exposure on an everyday basis. How harmful is that kind of exposure? A household product which probably has contamination and is used on an everyday basis for a long period of time. Dr. Manish.
So, hi, Ekta, and I do comprehend what you are trying to say. It's very difficult to prove causality. A small exposure, you have to actually prove that, that particular harmful substance has led to the causality of that particular cancer, and it's not very easy to prove causality. As a matter of fact, even for cigarettes, there was a time when cigarette smoking used to be considered healthy. And it took us almost a century to prove that cigarette smoking is harmful to health.
But I just want to take that point, Ashwin, with regards to talcum powder forward, because there are multiple brands. You do a small search online, you find multiple brands available in India. Some of them are just not even labeled talcum powder. So how would you control, say, asbestos reaching that particular product, which eventually goes to a consumer and is used for a longer period of time?
I think there are two ways to do that. The first is awareness. Right? People need to be aware of what these chemicals, what is the health effect of these chemicals. Once people are aware, as the doctor also was saying, that once people became aware of smoking and the harmful effects of smoking, the number of people using went down from 50% to 15% just by awareness. Nothing has changed. Laws and regulations, when they came in also, there were options. I mean, people didn't really care about the law. Once they realized, oh, it's affecting my health, and they were understanding that, they saw people around them dying because of cancer, then became like a real thing for them, and people became a lot healthier. Nowadays, people are becoming a lot healthier, health conscious. That's also because of a lot of awareness. The second is enforcement of law. Today, enforcement is a very large challenge because the country of our size, with the number of people, number of producers, is it's very, very difficult. If enforcement gets stronger, the punishments get stronger, because there's something people have to fear. It's either there's a stick or there's a carrot, right? So the carrot is better health, but the stick has to be for the manufacturers that, hey, if you're using substandard products, if you're not monitoring the quality of it, there has to be a big downside. And today, I don't think our enforcement is as strong as it should be.
Okay, all right. Well, Dr. Neeti, I want to come to the other issue. While we've spoken about the issue with regards to carcinogens in, say, the masalas and household products, there is also the baby food issue, which is currently at play, that maybe the sugar is above permissible limits, maybe the sugar is present, and whether it should be present, the jury is still out there. But how harmful is sugar from a young age for an infant, and does it increase your risk of disease?
So, Ekta, as everybody rightly pointed out, there's no way of linear correlation of these things. But as indirectly, we can definitely assume that why is it not good to have excess salt and excess sugar in baby products is because that leads to excess consumption of that, some kind of addiction and overuse, which can secondarily cause obesity. And obesity leading to cancer can be one thing in the long run, which we can think of. It is proven that obesity causes, one is excess cancers, certain cancers like endometrial cancer, esophageal cancer, liver and gallbladder cancer, which are also important problems of our country, are related to excess weight, obesity. The second thing is, if you're baseline obese, then you can have other comorbidities like lung issues, that heart issues, even cerebrovascular issues, and therefore your outcomes of any treatment are bad. So in both sense, excess sugar is bad.
Okay. Well, Dr. Manish, what do you think India should probably do when it comes to such regulations? Should they probably say that there should be no sugar added because of health concerns?
So certainly, as I think Dr. Neeti has said, it's very clear that added sugar should not be there. And this definitely leads to many other comorbidities, including diabetes or early onset diabetes. So there is no way that there should be any added sugar. As for the law enforcement, I think making a regulation is easier, but enforcing the regulation is much more difficult. And I think other colleagues have mentioned about this. So we have to find out ways how do we enforce that regulation, and there should be some random checks. We can pick up products from the market and just do random checks, and then call upon the culprit to why they. I have seen so many products which say that there is no added sugar, but if you test them, there would be some added sugar in it. So I think making a regulation is one part of the job. The second part of the job is making strict regulations and then applying them and making them effective.
Okay. Sure. Dr. Neeti, what is the link of sugar with cancer, if there is any? Because, one of the things which a lot of cancer patients are probably advised to do is to cut sugar out of their diet. So is there any correlation or causality, and what do you tell your patients?
Ekta, I think there is a lot of it as myth and then a little part of it as reality. So, I mean, no, cancer says don't eat sugar and all that. So I don't know at least of all those kind of correlation. But yes, as I said, excess sugar can cause obesity. Obesity can cause certain cancers. So that can be endometrial cancer, gallbladder cancer, liver cancer. Then the second thing is, if you're already obese, the outcome for cancer treatment is bad. These are the two things which we can definitely define.
Okay, all right. Dr. Manish as well as Dr. Neeti and Ashwin, we need to take a short break, but we'll be back with more. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're still tuned into the Medicine Box. Interesting discussion here. Before we went into break, we were talking about added sugars in baby food and possible correlations of sugar with cancer. Ashwin, I wanted your thoughts. Do all companies disclose there is that certain amount of sugar that they've put in their foods?
Most of the multinationals and the larger companies will, because what is at stake is their reputation. So if they're adding sugar, they will disclose it. The challenge is, should sugar be added, right? And I think, as both the doctors confirmed, sugar should not be added. And this can be solved with a simple stroke of a pen, with a regulation coming out saying no added sugar in baby products. It will take maybe around 6 months to go into play, right? Because FSSAI will have to release a draft, it will have to get approved and then go into law. But if there's enough pressure, which I think this case is probably building up a lot of pressure in the country, that, hey, why are our standards lower? Like, again, yesterday we were talking about the Nestle issue. Nestle has not done anything wrong because there is no regulation, right? If there's no regulation, why would they lower it? If you've seen, it's lower than before. I was discussing this with Mangalam off camera yesterday, I don't think it was decided that India should have 3 grams of sugar. Probably there were sugar levels in all products. Since US said, hey, there is no sugar, they made it 0. UK said, oh, there's no sugar, they made it 0. India didn't say anything. However, they did reduce it a little bit. It didn't go to 0 because there's no regulation for it to go to 0. Yeah. The minute India says make it 0, every large brand will make it 0. The issue is with smaller brands coming up, and there are hundreds of them coming up every single year, there has to be a stronger regulation and stronger monitoring of those products. Testing has to be mandatory before the product goes to shelf, and random checks have to be done. And
this is not only for sugar. This is for products across the board. We were just talking about talcum powder. How is there any guarantee that it's cornstarch or asbestos in the talcum powder?
So FDA, I mean, talcum will come under FDA, not FSSAI. Yeah. So FDA and FSSAI both actually have budgets to do randomized testing. However, those budgets are minuscule compared to what is available globally. To like a US FDA has billions of dollars to do randomized testing. India unfortunately doesn't. If FSSAI gets a larger budget and if they utilize it properly, India can have a very robust monitoring system. Today there is monitoring, but I don't think for the size and for our size of economy and the impact it is having, I don't think that budget is enough. So I wouldn't blame FSSAI. I've worked very closely with them in the past. I know the intentions are good. However, they are fighting a battle with one hand tied behind their back.
Okay, all right. Well, Dr. Neeti, I'm going to come to that one topic that you did bring up briefly, which is basically air pollution. Lung cancer cases are expected to rise around 7-fold in the next couple of years. Non-smoker lung cancer is around 40 to 50% of total lung cancer cases today in some cities. Can you give us a sense in terms of how big and serious a problem it is, and do you think that it's probably going to become an epidemic in India?
Ekta, I would say it's already an epidemic in our country, and cancer is the second commonest epidemic after infections like COVID. But yes, as you said, non-smoker related lung cancer is increasing, and all of us in the past 20 years have seen a change of profile. We have patients, non-smokers, women, younger patients who come with cancer. We know that certain parts of our country has higher air content of radon, soil content of radon. We have air pollutants, we have particulate matters which are more, there are indoor pollutants which are more, and there are certain unclassified pollutants which we don't know about which have increased cancer. Not just that, smokeless variants which we think like hookah, like vaping, all this have also increased the risk of cancer. We think that, we think they are safer alternatives, but these are also the cause of cancer. And the burden is increasing. Younger patients, lung cancer happens to be one of the first 5 commonest cancers in our country. And the number definitely seems to be rising.
Okay. All right. Well, Dr. Manish, you're in the heart of the problem. You practice in Delhi. So tell us what you see as a medical oncologist when it comes to lung cancer, non-smokers' lung cancer, and how serious a problem is air pollution.
My one-liner answer is I'm scared. I'm already quite scared because what I see today is very scary, and I don't understand what type of future we are giving to our children. We don't even have right to clean air. What else can we demand? These other products, breathing is something that we do every time, every day, every moment. If that air is not clean, what else can we demand? Is eating a few pesticides or taking or ingesting a few pesticides is risky, or breathing unclean air is risky? It's very dangerous. Our lung cancer incidence has risen too much. And I can tell you a study which we did at All India Institute of Medical Sciences in 2010. we saw that non-smoker lung cancer was about 8% of the total population of lung cancer patients. Today it is sitting at 35%. And there's no other reason which I think is the cause. It is just about air pollution and various other factors.
But Ashwin, you do some work with testing of air?
We are one of the largest laboratories for air testing in the country. The big change that I've seen in the last decade, a decade ago, maybe 1 in 100 customers used to ask for air testing. Now it is 1 in 3. 1 in 4 is asking for air testing. Today, all the large corporate offices in India get the air testing done 4 times a year, not once, 4 times a year, because all of them understand how air quality affects people within the building, right? It affects not just their productivity and their well-being, but it's disease causing, right? So when doctors said, hey, I'm really scared, I could completely resonate with that. Today, my home, my office, even my car has air purifiers. I don't think that's something that should be the case. I can understand for water, but for air, what you're breathing, having an air purifier everywhere, that is a scary situation. And a lot of this is caused because of construction, because of rampant use of chemicals, and many other factors.
Okay. Well, before we wrap up, Ashwin, I just wanted one quick answer from you. Many of the products which are used in India, say pesticides or other products finally, they are banned or they are restricted in terms of use in other countries, but either they are restricted or they are still used in our country. Why is there a difference in these regulations?
The lobbies for many of the companies are very strong, right? Now, with FSSAI itself, many of the committees, they have a mix of scientists, people with domain expertise, but they also have a very large plethora of lobbyists from the large multinationals. While their presence is important, I don't think they should be in majority. They should have a say, but they cannot be, dictating terms. And many a times I've seen that happen. And I think that's a little bit of a risk that we as a country are taking. I think that the way policies are decided, the way levels are decided, should be using science, obviously economics has to come into play, right? We can't always say that, oh, we are going to everything that the West does. I'm not saying that's what we need to do. But we have to set our own standards and we cannot treat our own people as substandard, right? Over time, levels can get increased in terms of adherence, but we need to aspire to be there. And I think FSSAI has a very young law, which is a good thing because it's constantly evolving. Right? There are some laws which are 50 years old, which haven't changed, but FSSAI has a very young law, it's hardly 13, 14 years old, and it's constantly changing. So I'm very hopeful to see in the next 2-3 years, FSSAI taking significant steps to make food, water, I don't know if they control air, but they don't control air, but making food and water safer in the country.
Okay, all right. Ashwin, Dr. Neeti and Dr. Manish, thank you very much for joining in. I'm sure this is a conversation which is just part 1 and will continue as, things progress. But thanks very much for joining in.